Welcome to the Winter Wellness Education Series. In this video, we're going to talk about fevers, diarrhea and vomiting, herbal antibiotics, and aftercare. All right, so first we're going to talk about fevers. So if your temperature is over 37.7 degrees Celsius, you have a fever. Now this is a normal, beneficial immune system response. So if you stop your fever, you're hurting your immune system. Fevers themselves don't need to be treated, but we can support the fever process so we can be more comfortable. However, fevers can be serious, so you really need to monitor them closely. So normal fever will last about 3 to 4 days and reduces over that time frame. The symptoms will be tiredness, lack of energy with no appetite. But you could be getting into trouble if your fever has lasted more than 4 days. You aren't intaking any more fluid, the person's listless, unresponsive, or they suffer from a previous heart condition. So if any of these exist, you need to go to the doctor immediately. And if you have a fever, then there's a few things you want to do. So you want to stay hydrated. One of the biggest concerns is becoming dehydrated. So you want to take small sips of lukewarm water or herb tea. Keep your feet warm and your head cool. So you could use a cool herbal tea compress. And interesting to note, tofu can draw heat from your head, and you don't want to force feed. So if you don't feel like eating, that's fine. Just make sure you're staying hydrated. And we're going to talk about two types of fevers. One's called wind cold and the other one's wind heat. They both have very different systems and herb recommendations. So the first one is wind cold. So the symptoms you'll be having is that you feel really hot, you have a red tongue, you have yellow phlegm, you have a fast pulse, and you have a red sore throat. So for this type of fever, we'd want to use stimulating diapyoretics. So these are warming and dispersing herbs that stimulate heat from the core to the periphery. They are generally warming, pungent, and spicy herbs. So we have ginger, and that's going to decrease inflammation and warm the body. We've talked about it before, but you can make a tea. You can make the tea with lemon and honey. Cayenne, so that's going to warm you up, and it's best to do that as a hot tea. And bee balm, which is antimicrobial, and it also makes a spicy tea. I find it has a little bit of an oregano spice flavor, and that's going to bring heat from the core to the periphery. So it's great if you also have congestion. And I've also made an infused honey with bee balm, and it's been pretty effective as well. So these are the herbs you would use if you had a wind cold fever. And then a wind heat fever, you're going to feel cold, so you're going to be shivering, have a pale tongue, white phlegm, a slow pulse, and an itchy throat. And so there's quite a few relaxing diaphoretics that we can use for a wind heat fever. So relaxing diaphoretics are going to open the periphery to let heat out. So they dilate the capillaries to reduce heat in the body. So linden is our first one. So it's astringent, antiviral, and as we've mentioned before, demulcent. And you can make it into a tea by taking about a half a cup of flowers to a pint jar and let it steep for 15 minutes. Then drink it at a lukewarm temperature. Elderflowers. So these are antibacterial and antiviral, and they're especially useful when you feel hot and restless. So they relax the periphery and allow heat to escape. So you can make them as a tea, tincture, glycerite, or even put them in the bath and just lay in the bath with the elderflowers. Boneset stimulates phagocytosis. It's used for high fevers with intense aches and pains. So sometimes if you have a fever and your muscles feel so sore, that would be a good time to use boneset. So you can make it into a tea, but it's really bitter. Not going to taste good at all. So tincture is the best form. Yarrow. So you can use yarrow actually for both types of fevers. It's traditionally used in sweat lodges to increase sweating. So you can take it as a tea or tincture, and it combines really well with elderflowers. Lemon balm is an antiviral herb that's cooling, calming, soothing. Great to use if you're also, you've had this fever and you just feel so horrible, like crappy mood. Lemon balm will help you feel a little bit better about your situation. You can make a tea with that. It tastes delicious. And then chamomile, which is a relaxing nervine. It's gentle, effective. It's great as a tea. You can also use it as a tincture as well. And then not on this list is goldenrod. So it will also help with fevers. And you can do the tea or an infused honey. And if you're having a fever that's rising and falling, then you might want to come make a combination, like a tea with some herbs that are relaxing and stimulating, diaphragmatics. And a good combination would be elderflowers, yarrow, and mint. So that would combine both the relaxing and the stimulating diaphragmatics, and that will be a great combination if you have the fever that's fluctuating. All right, now we're going to move on to a great topic of diarrhea and vomiting. So diarrhea and vomiting can be the body's natural defense against invaders. So basically it's the digestive system's way of ridding itself of toxins and viruses. Excessive diarrhea and vomiting can cause dehydration, sometimes severe, so you want to make sure that you're keeping hydrated with even just ice chips if that's all you can handle, and clear fluids. And if after 12 hours, either you or someone that you're caring for is unable to keep liquids down, then you definitely should go to seek medical attention. And if the patient is, I guess it would be the patient is young, like an infant, then 12 hours is definitely too long. You want to seek medical attention if the infant isn't urinating at least every 2 hours, because their little body's holding on to these liquids because they are becoming dehydrated. So go to the hospital or to the doctor immediately. And as far as treatment of actual cause of illness is concerned, there's not a lot we can do. The illness basically has to run its course, but we want to make sure that we're avoiding dehydration. So for vomiting, herbs that we can, use would be chamomile. So it's a nice relaxing antispasmodic. It's very gentle, so that will help just relax our stomach and help with the the spasms of vomiting. It will kind of calm that down. Ginger, so it has been used for a long time for nausea, motion sickness, morning sickness. So ginger tea be a great one to try if you're vomiting a lot. And then peppermint, so it's also an antispasmodic. And then it's going to help just calm the stomach down and relax it, kind of like the chamomile will. So these are all, and I would definitely say if you're vomiting, then drink these as tea, because the water content's going to help hydrate you, and it'll be a gentler form of medicine compared to a tincture. And then for diarrhea, we can do blackberry. So it's very astringent, so it'll help relieve the diarrhea. You can use the roots or the leaves and make a tea with them. And you can drink about 3 cups should be drank to help with the diarrhea, to really get the properties of the blackberry. Raspberry is also an astringent that helps relieve diarrhea. And again, same as blackberry, you use roots and leaves, make them into a tea, and drink at least 3 cups. Peppermint is an antispasmodic we just talked about, and it's also going to help relieve gas, cramping, or bloating if you have any of those associated with your diarrhea. And catnip, which isn't on the list, is also an antispasmodic. It's in the mint family too, so catnip and peppermint have quite a lot of similar properties. But it's also a little bit sedative, so it will help just relax your body a little bit. All right, and now we're going to talk about some herbal antibiotics. And I have a picture of Stephen Buhner's book, Herbal Antibiotics. So if you're interested, I would definitely recommend purchasing it and reading through. And what you're seeing here on the screen, the words I've taken from his book, kind of just changed the wording a little bit because, he says it best. So an antibiotic is a drug used to treat infections caused by bacteria and other microorganisms. Originally, antibiotic was a substance produced by one microorganism that selectively inhibits the growth of another. Synthetic antibiotics, which are usually chemically related to natural antibiotics, have since been produced that accomplish comparable tasks. Antibiotics were originally developed from naturally occurring sources. Plants have antibiotic substances serving as beneficial role around their root systems. Bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria. So everything has something that wants to eat it. So many common foods and herbs act as antibiotics like honey, garlic, onions, ginger, sage, and others. An antibiotic resistance is a genetic trait. So like brown hair, green eyes, but unlike these traits, antibiotic resistance transfers very quickly between one bacteria and another. Somehow, bacteria communicate with each other extremely rapidly, and through this communication, they are able to transfer survival traits. So I'm mentioning this because, oftentimes when you go to the doctor, you're prescribed an antibiotic, and they're chemically derived. So we want to try and maybe switch our thinking and start using herbal antibiotics, because antibiotics that are chemically derived are becoming resistant, or we're having antibiotic resistance to certain strands that they're making, because the bacteria is intelligent and they're communicating with each other because they want to survive. So like, okay, this antibiotic, was killing us. We're gonna try and switch up, how we're functioning so that we aren't being killed basically by these antibiotics. And they're communicating these to all the bacteria. So that's an issue, especially, if our first thought is I'm going to go to the doctor and get an antibiotic and kill this infection. Well, now if we get the antibiotic and the bacteria that we're trying to kill is resistant, that's obviously becoming an issue. So I just wanted to read to you a study that is in the Buhner book that I found really interesting. So in a study by Dr. Stuart Levy and his colleagues, they found that introducing antibiotics into chicken feed very quickly promoted the spread of antibiotic resistance bacteria in the chicken's intestinal tracts, as well as the intestinal tracts of the people working with the chickens. The chickens' guts changed within a week, the farm workers in 3 to 6 months. Further, the bacteria sampled were not only resistant to tetracycline, the antibiotic used, but several other commercial antibiotics. They had learned and adapted. So the good news, after they stopped using the antibiotic-laced feed for 6 months, no detectable levels of tetracycline-resistant organisms were found in the farm workers. So basically, the bacteria learned what antibiotic was, coming in contact with them on a daily basis, and they adapted so that they were resistant to that antibiotic. Very interesting. So many pharmaceutical antibiotics are isolated chemical constituents. They are one compound, one chemical. So penicillin is penicillin, tetracycline is tetracycline, and so on. So this makes it easier for bacteria to adapt and counteract. So they're not getting killed by that. But in contrast, herbs are much more complicated. So garlic, for example, has over 33 sulfur compounds, 17 amino acids, and dozens other compounds. Yarrow has over 120 identified compounds. So in plants, the whole appears to be more than the sum of its parts. The different compounds work together, and they often produce better than expected results. So the bacteria would have a much harder time adapting to a herbal antibiotic like garlic or yarrow, because there's so many different compounds working together to create that antibiotic function. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, read about, and research maybe which more natural antibiotics you would maybe use first before running to the doctor to get a prescription. So here are some herbs that are antibiotic. Garlic, I mean, we can just eat that daily in our food. Ginger, again, incorporate it into some of your food. Honey, yep, we want to use that every day in our food. Well, not every day, but we can use that instead of sugar, for example. Sage, we talked about sage a lot. Usnea, a great antibiotic, nice mild. Echinacea, another antibiotic herb. And I picked ones that we're familiar with, but in the book he has his top 15, and there's some herbs that we just can't find right here, don't grow, but you can read about them if you want to get his book. So those are ones we can use, and especially like the garlic or the ginger, the honey, you could use those quite like almost daily if you're incorporating all three, and that's really great for your immune system. All right, so we've talked about all kinds of different elements of the flu and how we can take care of them. Then there's also aftercare. So after we've been sick, our body's been through a lot, so we really need to do a little bit of work to support our lymphatic system, our liver, the immune system, so we can make sure that we're going to feel better and not get sick again. So 3 important things are rest, nourishing foods, and freshen up. So we want to, I guess we'll stay here for a second. Rest, you want to make sure you get adequate rest. So, don't jump right back into exercising. Maybe only go for a walk for 5 minutes. Just mild movements. Get some fresh air. Listen to your body. So even a few days after you've been sick, if you feel like you need to take a nap, take a nap. And if you've had a fever, then you should rest for the number of days you had the fever. So if you had the fever for 4 days, rest for 4 days. And if you had the flu, typically you should rest for 7 days to fully recover. You want to ease back into normal life. Nourishing foods, so eat lots of nourishing, warming foods like soups and broths. Really focus on whole foods, eating your rainbow, and not a lot of processed. And then freshen up. You want to have a shower, a bath, as soon as you start to feel better. Wash your sheets. You've been laying in the bed for a few days. Get those sheets out, clean them up. Open your windows, even if it's freezing out. Just open them up a little bit to get that stale air out. You can smudge with sage or cedar. That'll help clear the air. So you can either do, the typical sage or hydrosol. Cedar hydrosol is really great at freshening up the air. And it's also a little antimicrobial, antibacterial, so that'll help get any viruses that are lingering in the air right out the door. And then for herbs, we want to focus on a few here. So astragalus, which we've already talked about as an immunomodulator and helping to keep our immune system functioning properly. It's also going to support our lung health. So if we've had a really bad cough, astragalus would be good to incorporate. And that's also going to prevent future infections. So like I mentioned, you can do tea, a tincture. You can add the roots to soup or bone broth. That'll extract a lot of the good properties. Dandelion is very nutritive. It's going to give us lots of vitamins and minerals. It also supports our liver. So we want to support our liver because it's going to help get rid of those toxins and all the bad bacteria that's been causing the infection in the first place. And then mullein supports our lung health and keeps our lymph moving. So if our cold incorporated a lot of coughing, mucus in the lungs, then we want to have some mullein. And you could do an infusion of mullein. And then reishi, which I didn't put on here, but it's an immunomodulating herb, and it also supports the liver. So if you have a reishi tincture or make a reishi tea, it'd be great as well. And for a recipe, I decided to put bone broth here. It's one of my favorite ways to incorporate lots of vitamin and mineral rich herbs, and so easy to make. So you can just take some bones. If you cook a chicken, save the chicken bones, or if you have beef bones that you bought, whatever, put them in a pot, add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. That's going to help to draw out vitamins and minerals, especially calcium from the bones. Let it sit there for about 30 minutes, and then add in some vegetables. So I just add in vegetable scraps. I save them, put them in the freezer, and then just go grab a handful of them and throw them in the pot. But if you don't save your vegetable scraps, then you can put in like an onion, some carrots, some celery, just throw them in there. And then for herbs, I like to do, this says fresh, but you can do dried. Or no, it says dried too. So dandelion roots, burdock roots, yellow dock roots, astragalus that we just talked about. So you throw a handful of those roots in the pot. And I like to put in nettle because it has lots of vitamins and minerals as well. Throw the nettle in the pot. Fill the pot with water, and then you just let it simmer. And I usually do 24 to 48 hours of simmering. So sometimes I make it just on the stove, or sometimes I'll put it in the slow cooker. And I used to exclusively just put it in the slow cooker, but then I heard that there's different chemicals and like lead and things that could be extracting from the pot in the slow cooker. So I've tried to do it on the stove as much as possible. And then you let it simmer there, and then you strain it, and then you can store the broth in the fridge or the freezer and use it in your soups, stews. I make my rice in it. And then, or you could just drink it by itself. So then you're getting all the great benefits from the bones, plus those herbs as well. And it really is great at, keeping your immune system functioning. You could also put some mushrooms in there. So if you don't eat meat or you don't want to use bones, then just put a lot of different vegetables and, again, the mushrooms, and that would be your base. And then you could still put in your herbs, and you'll have a great base for your soups and your stews and anything else that you're making where you can incorporate the bone broth. All right, so thank you so much again for listening. I hope you found it informative. As always, I'll mention that if you want to buy any of the winter wellness products, like we have a bone broth mix that has all those herbs I mentioned. So you just take the bag and dump half of it into your pot. Pretty simple. You can order any of them, use the coupon code Winter Wellness, and you'll get 10% off the products. Thank you so much, and I hope you stay healthy during the winter months, and also incorporate, keeping your immune system functioning healthy and optimally throughout the whole year.